Hi there, welcome to the strange mystery of Rebecca Zahau. Today we're focusing in on a breakdown analysis with a diagram and photos from the house of the scene in regard to what happened to Max Shacknai, the son to Jonah Shacknai, and Rebecca Zahau being the stepmother to Max. The events in the early days, a day or two before her death, is about trying to figure out the significance of the event in which Max had his accident, eventually leading to his death in hospital, and how it may have impacted Rebecca, and if it impacted anyone else around that could have been responsible, or if there was a motive to justify what could have been done to Rebecca under the circumstances of her and how she was found. For most people, it's hard to believe that she would do it to herself. So, what else has gone on in between? My question I would like to put out there is, if you was to take Max Shacknai out of the equation, let's say that accident never happened, would Rebecca have still ended up dead days later, or what? Now, if there's any suspicion around other people of interest, even the likes of Adam Shacknai, brother to Jonah, the reason why Adam came on down and visited was to check in on Max. So if Max never had his accident and was never hurt, at that time, there wouldn't have been a reason or need for Adam to come on over. So because Rebecca and Adam were the only two people and the only two adults present at the California Coronado vacation home, Spreckles Mansion, that really Adam is the only other person there to have witnessed, seen, heard, or participated in anything. And it's, from his side, he's pleaded innocent and having no responsibility and just simply finding her the way he did and trying to help. And that was all. Not everybody believes that. Even the victim's family is cautious and skeptical, or at least has been in the past. So, you know, with the limited people supposedly involved in the case, you focus in on specific names. If those names were never present physically, if Max never was injured and had that accident, what are the chances of Rebecca still being alive till this day? Or, under certain circumstances, true crime related, could it have simply delayed the inevitable, as in she may have died at a later point if it was by the hands of someone that she knows of? Because in true crime cases, it tends to be a person that knows you somewhat well, maybe somewhat close, a colleague, a friend, a family member, a loved one, possibly. Things like that can take place. But the reason why it's important to understand Max Shacknai's situation is because, as we said, true crime related, involving the death of Rebecca, well, Max also died as well. So we need to acknowledge that situation. They were a 6 year old. So, in terms of, the wording and language, it does stand out there. And if we're talking about a timeline, as in when things started, moments of significance, a turning point, a catalyst. And what I said just before with that question, what would happen if Max didn't have that accident? I think that's why we do need to acknowledge it and go in deeper with that particular event, whether it led to a motive, whether it led to a decline or an impact on Rebecca herself and anyone else about, is about trying to figure out visually how it could have happened to Max if Rebecca was downstairs, as it was said, and Max was upstairs on a scooter going across the room, the hallways, but then ending up going down or over the stairs, banister, hitting the ground, a chandelier and other items being on his body partially. How did that all happen? Visually, we need to understand, and I'm here today to do an analysis in that style with actual photos from the house and even a diagram as well. I've added on extra markers and pointers when I talk things through, just so it's a bit easier to understand and follow, and just give my raw reactions on the likelihood of it happening as an actual accident and nothing else. Unless you think differently, in regard to this event or anything else on the matter, you're welcome to leave a comment down below under the video and share your thoughts. And for anyone that may be watching during this live premiere, if you want to, you don't have to, feel free to share your reactions there. Or even if you don't have much to say, you've always got the emoji live reaction too. I do appreciate those that are watching and have watched in the past. And if you are interested in similar cases like this and other true crime coverage, I have done so on my channel. The full playlist of them are available top right corner where the eye symbol is up there, the Noah Presgrove case and the Dylan Rounds case. If you do want to support the channel, there are some links below to follow through with. Before we go any further, just two other things I'd like to acknowledge. In regard to the Rebecca Zahau case, the events and dates, what we're looking at today, with the mention of some autopsy related text and screenshots later, the odd wording is blacked out. That's because YouTube is very sensitive on this case and topic due to the outcome for Rebecca. It's a touchy, sensitive subject, so trigger warnings. I've tried blanking out the odd text to try and protect myself and channel. Hopefully that makes sense. I do really apologize if the audio crackles or it sounds rustling. Unfortunately, that is the front facing mic. Sorry about that. But beside that, you've got the day of the accident. When was it? It was the 7th month of the 11th day, 2011, and it involved Spreckles' mansion, vacation home, where Jonah Shacknai was at, including Rebecca Zahau, as well as Max Shacknai and Rebecca's sister, who was 14 years old at the time. But on the day of when the events unfolded, Jonah wasn't about. He was elsewhere doing other stuff. So it just left Rebecca, a younger sister, and Max, and that's all. So if Rebecca's elsewhere doing other stuff, Max is upstairs, unattended. That's how it started. But Max was 6 years of age, so that was an appropriate age to, I guess, in some way let the person have fun and play about. Because truly, it's not the same situation as if it was a baby that was left unattended in a bath. That would be neglect. In this case, it's not neglect. But yes, you could argue and question what is a person of that age doing with a scooter inside of a house and upstairs of all places. But there's always that chance that at some point Max could have got that scooter and took it upstairs with him when Rebecca wasn't looking. You know, you can't have eyes in the back of your head 24/7. Whilst Rebecca may not be here, it's important to provide the perspective and balance that even though Rebecca isn't the biological mother, she is still the stepmom to Max. So there will still have been somewhat of an emotional connection and bond. And, you know, the after effects of it, once everything happened, it's still going to have an impact. And even maybe the feeling to some extent of responsibility and feeling to blame, but you know, it's natural, normal human behavior that there's nothing wrong with it. But it is important to understand you can't control everything and you can't have eyes in the back of your head 24/7. So it is an unfortunate situation. With that being said, to move on to the visuals description, I will do in a second. One last thing is, I just want to say just a little shout out to one key person, one individual who shared with me this particular case because I never heard of it before. Um, so without them, I would never have known about it and I wouldn't have been able to do the videos that I did because when I did learn about the case, true crime related, and I started covering it on the spot without much prompt, you know, learning on the spot and trying to do it quickly by producing a video within reason, because that's how I normally do it. Learning about the case and all the rich information, it was quite deep and overwhelming. But one key person was able to take that away and just provide, answers and clarity so I could learn. Whilst I might be the creator, other people about are just as important. And they're a perfect example of that. They were able to share with me what happened with the case, patient and understanding. And it helped me in terms of learning it on the spot and efficiently. So without them, I wouldn't be able to do the videos that I do. So it's much appreciated. Shout out to them. With that being said, we probably should get into this and start analysing. Here we are. So starting off with part of the autopsy, I blanked some of it out just so we could focus in on the important part here, just for extra information. The descendant, which is Rebecca Zahau, resided in the home at 1043 Ocean Boulevard in Coronado with her boyfriend at the time of 2 years, known as Jonah Shacknai, during the months between Memorial Day and Labor Day. During the rest of the year, they resided in Arizona. On the 7th month, the 11th day, 2011, Rebecca was at the home with her 14-year-old sister, who was visiting from out of town, and Jonah's 6-year-old son. Reportedly, the 6-year-old son, known as Max, fell in the entryway stairwell and was transported to Rady Children's Hospital with life-threatening injuries. This part is rather brief. If you look at other news articles online, it does give more detail. It's not just falling at the entry stairwell. The mention of the banister, the mention of the chandelier, the mention of a dog, and just before death, or just before the person becoming unconscious, the child calling out for Ocean, which was the name of the family dog at the time. So, at least in this area of the autopsy, it doesn't go into much detail. Because when you interpret it with what's just mentioned here, fell in the entryway stairwell, it makes it sound like that Max got too close to the edge of the steps and then went tumbling down them. Well, honestly, if he only simply went down the stairwell, he would have collided with the wall before even getting towards the bottom because of it being kind of like an L shape. Well, a bit more than an L shape. So there's more to it, and visually it'll make sense shortly. But yeah, taken to hospital with life-threatening injuries. Jonah and the boy's biological mother had been by his bedside since the incident. On the 7th month, the 12th day, a day later, Rebecca drove her sister to the airport to return her home. Whilst at the airport, she picked up Jonah's brother, Adam Shacknai, who flew in from out of town to be with his brother, Jonah. They went to the hospital to meet Jonah, and then the three went out to dinner, which left the biological mother at the hospital watching over her son. Does it seem like poor taste after what's happened and then going out to dinner? And whilst Jonah was with Rebecca at the time, Jonah leaving his son in the hospital with the biological mother just to sit there by herself, you could say it's a bit poor taste. I can understand people getting together, hanging out, drinking and chatting, but under the circumstances, is there a bit of a red flag? But really, who even decided to have that dinner out? Who had that idea exactly? It doesn't seem to say here. But they must have all been in somewhat of a consensus to hang out and talk and chat. The reason why it's weird is you got Jonah and Adam. Okay, they might be catching up and hanging out, but then Rebecca, who is the third wheel within it? Because is Rebecca closer to Jonah, or is Jonah closer to Adam because of family? In some ways, Rebecca would be closer to Jonah emotionally, but because it's girlfriend and boyfriend, and they've known each other for 2 years, they're not really developed properly, boyfriend, girlfriend. They've not become a true partner in a true relationship and got married. So we're still being kind of fresh in the relationship. Maybe Jonah was closer to Adam in more ways, in different ways compared to Rebecca. It's trying to figure out who was the third wheel, because the biological mother has more history and emotional connections to Jonah because of being together and having a kid themselves, which was Max. But, that biological mother is no longer with Jonah anymore. But Jonah is okay hanging out with Adam and Rebecca. When you go out for a date or hanging out, it's just the two of you. Or if you're hanging out with a friend or a family member, a brother, sister, catching up on lost time, or, letting off steam, it's just the two of you. When you bring a third person along, I don't know, under certain circumstances it's normal and fine, but under these circumstances, I don't know, it just seems a little bit unusual when the biological mother is kind of left out. Because if there's no harsh words and there's no ill will, then they should all get together and have dinner. But then again, maybe one had to stay behind for the sake of Max, didn't want to leave him alone just in case anything happened. And there was an agreement that, oh, don't worry, I'll stay behind, you lot go out and have fun. But it just seems weird going out having fun when your child is in hospital in a possible life-threatening way. You can let me know your thoughts down below. Beside that, Jonah returned to the hospital after dinner, which meant that Rebecca, the descendant, and Adam returned back to their holiday home. And then it says Rebecca was last seen by Adam, which we'll get to later. But that's just a bit of a backstory as to what happened with the accident and how people reacted the following day. It's in a short space of time, that's what's important. So the first day, the beginning of it all, the 7th of the 11th, 2011, this is inside of the house where what happened unfolded from Max to later Rebecca, which would have been the second floor through her bedroom and the balcony. I've done videos of that already on my channel, feel free to check it out. So with this being like 2-story and somewhat of an L-shaped staircase with the banister as well, 2 lots of L shapes. So it is marked out. I don't know if everything will fit into the screen when I zoom in, so apologies about that. But down there, I believe that is the front door. And the reason why sheeting is up covering the panes of glass is because this is obviously post-death of Rebecca, I believe. But because the chandelier is up, well, actually it's not up on this one, but it is on an alternative photo. So there's a chance that this one is more likely post-death and the events. And then the other slide will be maybe a property photo from the past of the house before everything unfolded. That's my guess. And the sheeting here will be up out of privacy so no one can see inside and during the police investigation and all of that. So it's all closed and locked up. And these would have been like the scenes and recreating visually what happened based on the actual spot location. So that will be the ground floor and probably the entranceway to the house. And this is the hallway, if you want to put it like that. And then coming up the stairs, just there on the left, coming up to the banister, and then going up the stairs again to the landing area and some rooms over there. And I'm sure the landing will go further on down to the different rooms, including bathroom, Rebecca's room, and anyone else's for that matter. And what I've done is I've marked it all off. So if you've got Max and he's on a scooter, I think it was called a Razor scooter, because it's got carpets even on the staircase with some mats as well, carpets on the ground level too, white carpets on the stairs, and out of sight the ground on the hallway landing and all the way up there on the second floor will have carpets too, like most homes. So if you're using a scooter on carpet, it is going to drastically slow you down. So the acceleration is going to be slowed down, the velocity will be slowed down. You'd have to probably exert more effort in pushing and kicking your leg back to get moving, to generate that movement and speed. So if you're slowed down, are you more or less likely to go over a banister with force? You're probably less likely. But one thing that counters it is the height of the banister. The higher it is, the less likely that Max would have gone over it. He's 6 years old. He's not that tall. The taller the banister, if he went over it, he would have to climb over it. But if there's not much to climb onto, it just wouldn't be possible. And what you see with the yellow arrows, the one highlighted in the oval and then the one on the far left, are rough measurements of the different banisters, the height of it. So if I just focus over here on the left-hand side where you've got the banister there, the line which I've used to try and measure it is longer compared to the one here. I hope that makes sense. And the main reason for that is the main banister up here on the landing area is, the proper height. And when coming down the stairs, the beginning of the stairway entrance, as it was worded in the autopsy, naturally it's on a decline, a gradient in line with the steps. So as you're going down the staircase, your hand is gliding down on the banister, which is pretty normal. And then once you reach a level ground here, on ground, not ground level, but on stable level ground temporarily, before you go down the next set or flight of stairs there, the banister equals out as well and becomes straight, no longer a gradient. And the height is tall once again. And that could be for safety reasons, regulations too, so no one would go over, fall over, even an adult to some extent. Similar to what you see on the landing up there, the height of it is taller compared to the banister height when going down the stairs themselves, highlighted in the oval there because of the gradient, and then the same down there. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're taking that in mind. If you've got Max on a scooter, he's coming down that landing, that hallway corridor, and he's going towards or slightly angled towards the entranceway of the stairwell, he could have come off at an angle, whether he tried stopping or not, and then collided with the lower part of the banister. And because of the angling of it as well and a bit of momentum, once he hit it, he went right over and fell. As said, if he had hit the banister up there where it's higher, likely he would have crashed into it and then fallen back on himself and landed on the carpet, and not much damage would have been done unless there was so much force that it caused the banister to completely break, and then for Max to go through it and hit the ground. Probably not likely due to the force, the momentum, the lack of it, and the carpet slowing the pace down of the scooter. But when it comes to the entrance bit there, the beginning of the staircase as you descend down, at the angle it is, with the banister being lower in height, meaning more of Max's body would be overhanging it. So if he does collide, he's going to go up and over. Kind of like if it's slightly the same in a way, that if you got hit by a vehicle like a truck or a bus, it'll knock you back or it'll push you over and then it'll run over you. But if you've got a car, a normal car, pushing it, an SUV, but a normal car, and if it hits you, the lower part of the car first hits your legs, and then sometimes from where you're hit, you can roll onto the bonnet and over the top of the car. You kind of roll over the car because it being lower in height. So you go over it, kind of like a banister. Once you collide with a lower banister, your momentum and body carries on over it. You roll over, you climb over, you fall over, and then you drop. So with the measurement of that arrow being smaller in height compared to the one that you see there on the left, it shows that the chances of going over and falling is a lot higher where it's highlighted in the oval. And based on the autopsy, that's where it occurred at. So it seems quite likely that it was an accident, and it was unfortunate, the angling of the way he was going and what he was going to collide into. You could say if he just straightened his handlebars or turned right a little bit, he may have hit the wall and he would have been okay. But at the angle that he was going at, he went towards the stairway entrance with the steps as well, where it could have been a bit of a stumble, misstep, and either grabbing or falling forwards towards the banister and that momentum carrying him over it. That appears to be the case, falling over. Then in terms of where I've got the rectangle drop to ground floor, you can't see it clearly from here, but when you look through the gaps of the banister, that is the ground floor down there, and that's where he fell. There is a gap in between the staircase where the oval is and then the staircase down there. In between, it's just a drop, and that might vary from house to house. It can vary from maybe country to country, depending on the situation. So with that being in mind, if we head on over to the next slide, this is kind of like the ground level, but partially looking up at the area. And I believe at this photo, before or after the event, it was apart, as in this wasn't taken at the same time as this one, because this looks pretty stripped and bare because of an investigation going on, forensics and all of that. And it's sealed up, covered the glass. The chandelier isn't there, as you can see, but it is there. And that's hanging. That chandelier, zoom in just for a second, that chandelier there, you see the chain, and it goes all the way up to the top ceiling of the second floor. So really, you should see the chain of it, at least here in the centre of the screen. There's no sign of that. So this is clearly after the event, but close together to show the after events. And with the description, although it didn't clearly mention it in that part of the autopsy, it did highlight that the chandelier was broken and was on the floor with Max. So how does Max go over the banister, and how does the chandelier fall with him? Well, whilst the chandelier is connected to the ceiling, okay, the chain of it, the chandelier is just a little bit higher, I think, or on level partially with the banister there, like the landing part before you go down the next set of stairs to reach the ground floor. So because that part of the banister there is somewhat in line with the chandelier, when you compare it to this is the banister, what I was referring to there, near that box. The chandelier should be in that area, centre of the screen, right? It's below the banister here. So for the chandelier to be lower down, it means when Max went over this part of the banister, highlighted in the red oval, as he fell over, he either directly landed on top of the chandelier, partially collided and hit it, maybe even tried grabbing it as a reflex to stop falling. But, you know, maybe the chandelier could only take so much weight and snapped. So as he grabbed it and his weight pulled and the gravity, it caused the chandelier to snap, the chains to break off and, you know, fall with him. So it didn't really slow him down. If it slowed him down like some kind of parachute, he may have survived and been better off, but that appears to not be the case. So as you see highlighted here, I don't know if that table was present, that ornament. I'm not too sure if that was there at the same time as when Max went over the banister, because if he did, he would have collided and hit it, landed on his back or landed head first, and that could have caused further injury. Beside that, hitting the ground, which I believe is carpet, but nevertheless, carpet or not, it will only absorb so much impact and energy. And if you land somewhat head first or your spine hits the ground, it's not going to be good. We've got to take in mind that certain situations can be more fatal to different age ranges. If you've got an elderly person and they were to fall from that height, it could be pretty critical, fatal. If it's a much younger person, then it can be just as fatal, if not worse. And that's just because of how developed the body is, how resilient it is, the bones, the structure within. Once your body has developed and become healthy and strong, and you've become maybe a teenager, more of a young adult, once the body's more developed, it might be a bit more resilient in some ways physically. If you're young, you're still growing, so bones and muscles can be a bit more fragile and gentle within. Just like when you've got a baby, you got to be careful with handling a baby. If you was to accidentally be clumsy, or even when people go over the top and shake a baby, that can be critical. Yet if you was to shake a human adult, you don't have to be as delicate, it's not as fragile, because the body, biologically, the cells, the brain within has become a bit more resilient and tough. When you got something smaller, it can be more fragile. You've got to be careful. And even a 6-year-old, you've got to be careful. And they themselves have to be careful because they could get injured badly. And with an elderly person, the way the body ages and becomes a bit weaker over time physically and in other ways, a knock to the body could cause really bad bruising and much more. But a person of a younger age, but not too young, a knock, they may not think much of it. Just like how people joke that when you get older, if you have a slip or a fall, you don't get back up as fast as you normally would. So it goes for both age ranges, old and pretty young. That when you hit the ground like this from a certain height, it's a problem. So that's what you got to take in mind. What I've also done, I've highlighted in yellow the outline of like the ceiling and where the landing would be when going up the stairs. That's why it's highlighted in yellow. And that open space from yellow line to yellow line from left to right is where the gap is. And that gap is big enough for the person to go over the banister and fall down and either hit, grab and hold on to the chandelier. Now, probably not going to be holding on to it too long. If the chandelier didn't break immediately and Max grabbed onto it and held onto it for a little bit of time, if the chandelier was turned on, I'm not too sure if it was, would there have been any burn marks, heat marks on Max's hands from grabbing it? If the chandelier got too hot, the more lights, the more energy it uses, depending on if it's efficient in energy or not, it could heat up. And if you hold on to it too long, like with a light bulb, it could cause a bit of surface skin damage. I mean, I've not really seen anywhere the mention of damage to the hands, but if there was any burn marks, under the conditions that the chandelier was actually turned on and used at the time, the stronger or visible burn marks or heat marks could be on Max's hands, could imply that he held on to the chandelier for a certain length of time before it broke off the chain and he landed on the ground along with the chandelier. I'm not saying that the chandelier is what finished him off. Just hitting the ground is bad enough, but it makes sense in understanding why the chandelier landed on the floor beside or on partially Max's body. Because when you go over the banister, as you do there, and you're falling down that way, there's nothing in between besides the chandelier to stop you. So that's the only other thing you could grab onto in the moment, and it probably wouldn't be enough. So that's what caused it to break, likely. And then the arrow in red is pointing to around the area where Max hit the floor. Whether that table ornament was there or not at the time. If it was, it would have acted as another object, a hazardous, fatal one, especially if you bang your head. So with that happening, it would have caused a commotion and noise and would have grabbed the attention of Rebecca, who came on in to find Max there. And upon panicking, she got her sister over, and then the sister supposedly performed CPR, or at least tried to, whilst Rebecca was on the phone calling an ambulance services and all of that. If we move on over to the diagram, just another way of looking at it, this isn't something that I made. This is what you can find online. I just wanted to give you my interpretation first of all, so you could see what it looks like. It's not the most accurate because that just shows a person running. Now, Max was on a scooter. So if he's on the top floor, going across that landing towards the stairway entrance, he would have been on a scooter, meaning he would have been a little bit more off the ground. And, you know, like when you're on a motorbike, and if you went head on with a car, the motorbike hits the front bumper of the car, and that sudden stop and that force and momentum forces you to go forwards because you're not wearing a seatbelt. And then you end up going flying towards or over the car, rolling over it or going through the window screen, depending. It's just like with if you was in a car and you weren't wearing a seatbelt, under certain circumstances, if you crashed into something, you could go right through the window screen because there's nothing there to stop that movement momentum. For someone like Max, who's on a scooter, like a push one, not electric, not back then, and went into that banister at a lower level, falling over, possibly grabbing onto the chandelier or just colliding with it, causing the chandelier to snap, as you can see, and Max falling and then hitting the ground face first from the looks of it, and the chandelier landing beside him or on top partially. This seems to be all in one go. So maybe once he grabbed the chandelier, it instantly broke, or did it break a bit afterwards? If there was a bit of a delay, there could be some burn heat marks on his body, but that's only if the chandelier was in use. So yes, it does seem likely that Max was able to do that by accident and no one else was involved. I did read an article somewhere which seemed to get some information wrong, because it mentioned that the sister was 13, not 14, and then by then I couldn't trust the article. But part of the article was claiming that the biological mother felt there was more to it and launched an investigation, believing that maybe Rebecca played a role or a part within it. But why would Rebecca do that? How would she gain from it exactly? And the end outcome for Rebecca, it just wouldn't make any sense. At the most, Rebecca could feel responsible as in neglecting Max, but the age Max was, under the circumstances and being in the house and not, left to walk outside of the house and then walk off and become missing, it's not that extreme. There's only so much that you can do, really. So when taking that into consideration, when we move on to the rest of the autopsy, some additional details, past medical, surgical and social history, according to the descendant's sister, Mary, Rebecca had no known medical history. She was described as a health nut who was very conscientious about what she ate and exercised regularly. She had no known psychiatric issues and had no previous, feelings of wanting to end stuff. She was not prescribed any medication. She was upset about the recent injury of her boyfriend's son, which is Max. So at the time, it was just deemed as a bad injury and nothing more. But it did get worse with time. But did not seem... So at that time, Rebecca did not seem to blame herself or take an excessive amount of responsibility for the accident. That line itself makes it sound like she's cold. However, it does say her 14-year-old sister, who had been dropped off at the airport on the 12th day, later in the day, had talked with Rebecca at 21:50 p.m. Now, on the autopsy report, it says that is when Rebecca was last seen, which visually can't really be the case. but technically I kind of understand. 2000 hours is when Adam last saw Rebecca. Once they got back from dinner, back to the house, and Adam retreated to the guest house and Rebecca stayed in the main house. It was 2000 hours, I guess, before they parted ways when they saw each other. That's when Adam last saw her. But the true last person supposedly to have seen Rebecca alive was nearly 2 hours later at 21:50, which was the sister, but that was over the phone. So you're hearing from Rebecca when she was last heard, not quite last seen. But you can make the assumption and say, who you have a conversation with on the phone, it's really them, so that must mean that's when they're last seen. And if you know where they are roughly, as in at the house, yeah. But, you know, just language and wording, I pick up on that. It says Rebecca on the phone was in normal spirits and stated she would call her, the sister, the next day. She also recently made tentative plans to visit her family in Missouri in September or October. Right, interesting. For her to be in normal spirits. Was it mentioned here or elsewhere? It does say that she was upset about the recent injury, so it did have an emotional impact on her, as you would possibly expect, but they didn't seem to blame themselves much at all, which maybe is the right thing, the healthy thing to do, but maybe subconsciously they may have felt a little bit responsible. But, you know, at the time of when it all happened, if it wasn't deemed as, like, you know, death immediately and it's just an injury, a bad one, you're going to worry, you're going to feel bad and sad, but when you don't know the true extent of the injuries in the moment, you might still be in somewhat normal spirits, or maybe your body's gone into shock or self-defense mechanism where you try and block everything out because it's all too real, and you want to try and regulate your body and mind. So either pretending it didn't happen or by trying to minimize the situation and the impact of it to protect yourself. Maybe Rebecca may have done that subconsciously. So at the time of when she was in normal spirits and saying that she would call the next day, maybe the next day when Rebecca woke up, either reality kicked in or they couldn't hold that shield up anymore, the mask. The mask dropped and they woke up feeling different compared to how they were the day before. Sometimes there can be a delayed reaction. Sometimes it could be adrenaline. It could be something that wears off and then you start feeling the pain or the worry. One thing that could have accelerated it may have been that voicemail which Jonah left on the day of her death. We'll get more into that shortly. And it's mentioned here a bit later on in regard to the hospital. Whilst Rebecca and Adam returned home and Jonah was at the hospital, Rebecca was last seen by Adam at around 2000 hours, as I said earlier. She was in the main house and Adam went to the guest house behind the main residence. The next day, the 7th month, the 13th day, 2011, at approximately 6:30 in the morning, Adam exited the guest house into the courtyard area between the guest house and the main house. He immediately saw Rebecca as she was over the balcony and with stuff around her neck. I say that because I don't know if YouTube is a bit sensitive, but what you see on screen is what you see, and it wasn't good, basically. And it was attached to her to a second-story balcony. Adam ran into the main house to get a knife and got a wooden table to Rebecca's body, and he stood on top to cut the rope, and Rebecca ended up either falling to the ground or he carried her and then laid her down. They were unclothed, which is a bit strange, and I believe that their feet were a bit dirty. That may be because of the balcony being dirty as well. But there might have been a lack of footprints on the balcony I don't think there was any footprints of hers on the balcony besides one, which was to do with a police guy afterwards. So how did she manage to go over the balcony without laying footprints on the landing of the balcony? That's what's a little bit weird. But yeah, unclothed and laying on the grass. Aerial photos were taken of her, and we've done a bit of an analysis in the past about that, but YouTube didn't seem to like it, so I'm being careful this time round. Hopefully it's okay. Then it says, Adam removed a blue cloth which had been in her mouth, almost like a gag, and in an effort to perform CPR, that's what he did. And at 6:48 in the morning, then placed a 911 call to request assistance. So from 6:30 to 6:48, in between that span of time, he didn't think to call 911. But, you know, with the timing of getting items and rushing about and trying to undo her and then check how she is, it's understandable in a way. The Coronado Fire Department had arrived at 6:53, which is really quick, and confirmed the death without intervention. So what that means is, when the fire department arrived on scene, they basically already knew what the situation was with Rebecca, and they likely gave the time of 6:48 the time of death, because that's when Adam tried performing CPR and it seemed like there was no hope. If you look at the full autopsy, it does say roughly time of death 6:48, so it kind of ties in with this here. Even though some of the experts, officials arrived after that point, I guess when referring back to a previous time as a timeline, that's the given time when they believe that's when it was confirmed as death, because if you perform a CPR, there's no breathing, there's no pulse, nothing, well then that's pretty much it. But did Rebecca really pass away at 6:48, or was it earlier on? She may have been found over the balcony with the rope at 6:30, but how long was she in that position for? Hours? Minutes? What exactly? That's what's kind of unusual in a way. Moving on here, a little bit more in addition. Says opinion. According to the investigator's report, an investigation by the San Diego Sheriff's Office and a scene visit by me, the 32-year-old woman, Rebecca, was the girlfriend of the owner of a large beach home in Coronado, Spreckles Mansion, on the evening of July the 12th, 2011. She stayed at the home with her boyfriend's brother Adam, who had just flown into town. Also that evening, her boyfriend was at Ready Children's Hospital with his 6-year-old son, who was, her, who had fallen in the home under the descendant's care the previous morning. So this is implying under the descendant's care, almost like neglect, you could interpret it, and it resulted in suffering life-threatening injuries. Life-threatening injuries which did Rebecca know to the extent on the day? And then the day after, or what? Because if she seemed quite calm or in decent spirits, it didn't seem to impact her much. If she didn't know the true extent, then you may not be as worried. Once you know about it, things get more real. It says, Max eventually died on July 16th, ME case, on the morning of July 13th. So this is the important thing to acknowledge. Max passed away days after Rebecca's death. So Rebecca dying first, would it be because she felt guilty of what happened to Max? Well, if she was okay the day or night before, what's changed in between? Okay, the voicemail, but ultimately, if Max had passed away 3 days after Rebecca did, why would Rebecca have to pass away, end things first, when there's still that fighting chance that Max is technically still alive? If Max had passed away the morning of July 13th and the news was passed on from Jonah to Rebecca, she woke up and she heard that news, then maybe that guilt, that grief and all of that could come about so intensely, so quickly, that it overtakes the body and mind. But that's not how it was. as it's worded here. So she didn't need to end things if that's how it's portrayed. Is it possible that out of her control, someone else or something took over? But why would they? If Max is still alive, technically, why would anyone need to lash out on Rebecca so abruptly? At least give it days until something comes about. Unless people got a bit heated the moment, and acted irrationally. You could say that. Let's just continue on. So July 13th, Rebecca's boyfriend's brother, Adam, emerged from the guest house into the courtyard and found Rebecca over the balcony and the stuff round her neck, fully suspended from a small balcony on the second floor with her hands and feet tied. That sounds pretty excessive, and gagged as well. He cut her down using a knife and nearby table, removed a portion of a blue shirt that was in her mouth, and called 911 at 6:48. Coronado Police Department personnel responded and began cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. Coronado Fire Department personnel responded, felt rigor mortis in her jaw, and other areas were checked. So if rigor mortis has kicked in, she was there for a certain length. Now, I can't remember if rigor mortis had set in as well. See, in the Noah Presgrove case, rigor mortis and livor mortis came in, and that could have been a few hours of Noah being left on the highway. He walked away at 3:30 in the morning and was found by a trucker and then police at around 5:43, 6 in the morning onwards. About 3-4 hours passing by of Noah possibly being on the highway, dead for that long. Would it be 2 to 3 hours Rebecca was over the balcony for? I wonder. Now, whether it be by her, which people may not agree with, or if it be by someone else, the fact that there is a gag in the mouth, that seems to be done in order to prevent the person from making any sounds. So whether it be the person themselves or someone else involved, whoever didn't want to make a noise and didn't want to get the attention of anyone or locals nearby to possibly intervene and help. That someone or themselves did not want to be helped in that moment. Due to what was written on the bedroom door of her bedroom, whether it's in third person or by someone else, it implies a level of darkness, and maybe we can do that for a separate video at some point. The only other thing to highlight here is that, well, below it says, no known history of being diagnosed with depression and no medical history. Of course, things like that can come about at any time if you go through such events. In a short space of time like that with Max, would it have led on to a form of depression or history with medical issues? Probably not, because in a short burst. There might have been intense emotions, but not such an action like that. Give or take, it was days, weeks, or months to process it, and it was ongoing and other stuff happened in between. Well, then maybe you could link it to a person struggling, but in such a small period of time, how likely is it really? Just to add on, it does say that into the investigation of 2011, the details regarding her checking her voicemail is a central point which has been used by authorities to establish a timeline and a motive for it being self-inflicted. Not everybody agrees with them. Key details of the voicemail, timestamp. The phone records show the last outgoing call from Zahau's phone was to her voicemail at approximately 12:50 in the morning on July 13th, 2011. 12:50 a.m. Basically 00:50. So it's near to 1 in the morning, which, okay. So before 00:50 a.m., it was 21:50 p.m. July 12th, hours earlier into the night before, when Rebecca was last on a call with her sister. Then hours later, 2-3 hours later, 12:50 in the morning of Monday past midnight, that's when the voicemail is sent. Is that the same time as when she listened to it though? The last outgoing call was a voicemail at 12:50, but what was the exact time when she listened to it? It was worded that she did check a voicemail. It might have been at the same time, but what happened in that span of time though? And did Adam receive a voicemail as well? And when did he check his phone? You know what I'm saying? Adam in the guest house, Rebecca in the main house. It was Jonah, the boyfriend, that sent Rebecca a voicemail in regard to the situation. It says the contents: investigators state the message informed Zahau that 6-year-old Max Shaknai, her boyfriend's son, had taken a turn for the worst and was unlikely to survive his injuries from a previous fall. So it seemed like it was inevitable that it was going to result in death. Now, if that was sent at 0050 in the morning, 10 minutes off 1 a.m., and Zahau listened to that, it could have been distressing. It's understandable. If it went from a injury to now it's going to possibly take a turn for the worse and not likely chance of survival, then it might kick in terms of Rebecca's mind, her thoughts and her feelings. That's understandable. But beside Rebecca and her smile, what about Adam Shaknai? Did he get contacted by Jonah? Did Jonah send Adam a voicemail too? Or did Jonah think, well, I might as well only send it to one of the two people because they're both living at the same place. So if I tell Rebecca, then Rebecca can tell Adam. So it makes me think, what actually happened once Rebecca listened to it? There's been some mentions that at some point she had a bath or a shower in the morning time. Was that before or after the voicemail? And whenever Rebecca listened to it, as distressing as it may have been, did she rush outside and tell Adam about it? Adam doesn't really seem to mention anything like that. And how it was worded in the autopsy is that Adam simply just walked outside of the guest house at 6:30 a.m. and then found her, not expecting it. So he was in no rush or hurry. The fact that around 6:30 Adam was in no rush or hurry when exiting the guest house implies that he was in the dark, left in the dark about the true condition of Max. And yet it's Rebecca that was informed by Jonah. So did Jonah contact Rebecca with the voicemail and then in hopes of Rebecca would then relay that on to Adam, possibly? But whatever happened in between that, Adam wasn't reached out to. That's how it seems to be. So if Adam's in the dark, from the looks of it, and Rebecca knows of the situation, she doesn't share it with Adam or simply doesn't get the chance to. But why? So in understanding what happened to Max makes sense. As unfortunate as it is possible for it to occur based on the height being lowered at the banister level going down the stairs and the entranceway to where he went diagonally over and just below under the chandelier and grabbing that. But Rebecca's initial reaction and feelings to that, feeling sad but supposedly not feeling responsible, yet the day after onwards, the 13th, when she wakes up, and whenever she listens to that voicemail, what the feelings become real, responsibility suddenly kicks in, even if it wasn't her fault in the first place, but now feeling more responsible because of the extent of the outcome. Technically, Max wasn't dead at that point, but it was looking that way. In hours' time, days later, whenever it would be, unknown at the time. Did it shake Rebecca up? Did it cause her to back away? I wonder. Would it have caused her to take such actions and do what she did to herself in that span of time and even paint on the door? Because the paint on the door in block writing worded as she saved him, can you or can he save her? Is that in third person, or is that a third person writing it on behalf of Rebecca and Jonah? We can do a separate video on that. There was a paintbrush as well. I don't know if I mentioned it a bit earlier, but like when it came to Adam performing the CPR on Rebecca and getting the knife to cut her down, there was no touch-based DNA of him on those items. Even though he said he performed this action and that action, there was no DNA or touch-based of him to prove that, which is a bit unusual and odd. And he supposedly wasn't wearing gloves either, so he's got bare hands. There should have been something that was left behind, like a print. The other question, though, what about the touch-based DNA of Rebecca? Well, it was said that on a knife in the house, a different one, there was some touch-based DNA of her on it, and even blood to do with her, but more period blood. Now, periods and stuff like that can be brought on early by ongoing stress and anxiety, whether that be because Rebecca was in a moment where she was fighting for her life, if there was someone, another person present, going after her for whatever reason, or if it be when she heard that voicemail and just that alone set in panic and shock for her. See, the thing is, depending on the timing of it, I do have a very important theory in which I might need to do a separate video on. And even though I normally don't do it, I might even write it down now because it's important enough. It's in regard to Rebecca, the voicemail, action taken, let's write that down, and even involving Adam Shacknai, but in the early hours of the morning. Early hours of morning. Possible reaction gone wrong. If you want to hear more about that, let me know. A thumbs up or a comment down below if you'd like to see a new theory on how things could have escalated and gone wrong. Possible explanations as to why Rebecca's feet were dirty. She might have been in a rush to tell people or pass a message on, but in doing so, another person could have reacted badly. But out of all the people that would react badly, why would it be Adam? When although Max is family to Adam, but really Jonah is one who's much closer than the biological mother because they're the parents, true parents. They would feel it more. The victim's family, the true ones that would suffer the most. Rebecca would feel it too because although she is the stepmother, she is a part of the family in a way. But there could have been a disconnect, there could have been an escalation of problems, and it might have not all happened in the house. It could have been from one place to another, just like the Noah Presgrove case, just like the Dylan Rounds case. It doesn't always happen in one static spot, it can spread. So we need to do some follow-up videos on this case and situation. But what I do also need to do is catch up on some other videos. I've got a bit of a backlog going on with recently dealing with the audio technical issues, which still ongoing. It's just delayed stuff. So I'll have to get some other videos done in between, but there is unfinished business with the Rebecca Zahau case. 2, 3 more videos maybe. Be on the lookout for them. I'll try and give like a heads up when it's possible to do so. But yeah, unfinished business. You let me know what you think about Max's accident and whether it directly links to Rebecca's outcome or not, and if there was any external reactions as well. But I just hope you enjoyed the video. And the only other final thing I would like to say is kind of like in regard what I mentioned earlier. If I'm correct in saying it is someone's birthday today. I know it's their birthday, so I just like to say to them, happy birthday, and sending you birthday wishes. I hope you've had a good day, and if you have, I hope you managed to enjoy this video. So happy birthday, and you know who you are. With that being said, we'll leave it there. We'll see what happens next. My name's Warlike Ref. Thanks for watching, and for those that watched in the background, goodbye, good night for now.